"You're in the wrong building, sweetheart. The broom closet's down the hall." That was the first thing Amira heard when she stepped onto the polished obsidian floors of Veltran 9's tryout gym. The Virillian boy who said it had translucent scales that shimmered gold under the high ceiling lights. He towered over her by 3 feet, clutching a plasma baton and a smirk that looked permanently glued to his face. The laughter that followed wasn't just loud, it echoed. Echoed through the dome, through the halls, through her eardrums like a fire alarm that no one else noticed. Behind her, the doors sealed with a hiss. She took a deep breath, felt the binders on her wrists buzz faintly, and chose not to answer. It was a school gym. And she had been here before. Maybe not on this planet, maybe not in this galaxy, but in every language, it was the same. Someone always laughed first. Tryouts for Project Vanguard didn't care if you were a born warrior, a tactical genius, or a certified galactic nightmare. They wanted spectacle. And Veltran 9 was the flashiest venue of them all, a hub station orbiting the edge of the Orion spread. Massive glass ceilings filtered nebula light into the gymnasium. Dozens of cadets from 20 species milled about in sleek training suits, stretching, tossing weights, psyching themselves up like it was the final round of a battle arena. Most had battle scars already. Some had tails. One had a personal gravity field around his head that made the floor ripple. In the middle of them, Amira Vale stood alone in human-issue gym shorts and a gray t-shirt with a faded Terran logo. Around her ankles were soft black bands that beeped when she walked. No one else had those. She was 5'0", didn't have claws, and hadn't brought a single weapon. That alone made her a legend before the session even started, for all the wrong reasons. The galactic assessors sat behind a glass partition on the second floor, tapping notes into holoscreens. When Amira's turn came to check in, the machine beeped twice. Then it stalled. The attending officer frowned and tapped again. Her profile displayed only the basics. Name, Amira Vale. Species, human. Origin, Earth. Combat credentials, redacted. All of them. No numerical scores. No psych profile. No previous academy ID. Just a photo and a classification number that didn't match any known system. The attending officer leaned closer and whispered into his comm, then, forcing a professional tone, he cleared her and nodded her toward the central floor. A whisper ran through the gym like static. Earth Girl's file was blank. That meant either she'd never fought a day in her life, or she'd fought in places no one was allowed to talk about. The former seemed more likely. She didn't have the build of a soldier, let alone a human elite. Her shoulders were relaxed. Her eyes calm. She hadn't so much as flinched when someone elbowed past her. But she kept adjusting the restraints on her arms, the ones nobody else wore. They weren't weights. Not standard ones, anyway. They had faint blue markings and 3 digital locks on each side. The symbols were containment class, usually reserved for unstable bioweapons. Or former prisoners of war. The physical warm-ups began with gravity shifts. The gym rotated to simulate lunar pull, then Jovian heaviness, then Martian mid-drift. Amira moved like someone who didn't care if she tripped. On Mars mode she nearly did, stumbling forward and catching herself with a lazy-looking hop. That stumble made one Karka cadet snort loudly, enough to draw attention. The Karka's body was covered in armored plates and spike ridges. His idea of humor was launching a training ball the size of a small meteor toward her head. Most cadets flinched. Amira didn't. She simply leaned sideways. The ball zipped past, crashed into the far wall, and embedded halfway through the metal. Everyone turned. She blinked innocently. The Karka laughed louder. Inside the observation room, one assessor tapped his screen. He had paused a clip of her stumble, enhanced it. Her fall had occurred precisely as a spiked tile rose beneath her foot. It should have impaled her ankle. It didn't. The footage revealed something strange. Her leg had flexed, not out of panic, but with intention. Muscle fibers contracted at a speed nearly invisible to the eye. The dodge wasn't luck. It was precision. The assessor flagged the file. His supervisor looked once and shook her head. It's probably a glitch, she said. No one from Earth scores like that. The second event was mental acuity. A series of holographic simulations tested tactical instinct. Each cadet wore a neural band. Amira's lit up slowly. The questions were puzzles, alien logic traps, battlefield scenarios, chemical chain reactions, stealth orders with unclear outcomes. She stared at each screen for 3 seconds, hit a response, and moved on. Some cadets took a minute per question. The system flagged her for unrealistic response time, but her answers were never wrong. Never even partially incorrect. One instructor chalked it up to guesswork. Another quietly began rerunning her results against archived military simulations. The pattern emerged. Her response times were faster than human baseline, without error. That required neural enhancements, but her file claimed no implants. In the third session, Physical Strategy, Amira volunteered for the wall run. It was a slanted structure designed to knock down overconfident brutes. Weight sensors embedded in the panels would react differently depending on speed, mass, and direction. She trotted up to it as others watched and waited for the inevitable slip. She ran. Not fast. Not dramatic. But smooth. Midway through, one tile popped. She launched sideways off it, tagged the buzzer midair with her fingers, landed on one foot, and walked away without turning around. The floor erupted. Someone said she must have gotten lucky. Another muttered, "That's not possible." A Virilian girl shook her head slowly. She timed it. "You don't get lucky like that 3 times. By the end of the rotation, Amira's scorecard was still marked inconclusive. Several cadets were already nursing minor injuries. One was sent to med bay after pulling a dorsal muscle. Amira? She sat cross-legged against the far wall, sipping water like she was bored. When asked to log feedback, she simply wrote, "Happy to be here." The Karka cadet from earlier growled, "She's either insane or trolling." He wasn't far off. Because just then, as the gym lights dimmed and the final roster was posted, one cadet noticed a warning on the last line under her name. Asterisk, this candidate is fitted with 3-point neural dampeners. Combat potential suppressed at 72%. Do not remove without class 4 clearance. Asterisk. No one else noticed. But the Karka who'd thrown the ball looked again. Then he looked at her. Then at the crushed wall where the ball had landed. And for the first time since the tryouts began, his smile slipped. Just a little. The gravity in the gym was dialed back to Earth standard as the second stage of tryouts began, bringing a low hum to the floor panels. Dozens of cadets filed into the gauntlet chamber, a dome lined with pulse turrets, kinetic traps, reflex sensors, and floating drones loaded with stun modules. The purpose was simple: survive the run with maximum efficiency and minimal injury. Most of the cadets had trained for months, some for years, to perfect their movements through this kind of course. Amira, on the other hand, looked like she'd wandered in after missing the school bus. Her hair was tied back in a loose band. Her gray shirt was now stained with a drip of water from her bottle. And yet, she was grinning slightly. Not the smile of someone trying to show confidence. The kind of grin that said she'd seen worse. Much worse. The instructors activated the sequence. First group of cadets took their places. Lights shifted from green to yellow. Then red. A siren blared and they were off, leaping, sliding, dodging laser blasts and gravity pulses. 2 of them didn't make it past the first electric coil. One landed wrong and cracked a shoulder. Another lost balance when a ceiling panel flipped mid-jump. The rest barely made it out with low efficiency scores. It wasn't meant to be fair. The course adapted to each runner. It read their strength, and then challenged it. When it was Amira's turn, the instructors debated whether she should go alone or be placed in a group. Her stats were still unreadable. One suggested pairing her with elite-ranked cadets. Another laughed, and said it would be an insult to them. The proctor shrugged and cued her solo. A few cadets gathered by the glass to watch. The Karka leaned against the wall, arms folded, whispering to a fellow brute. "Let's see if her luck runs out." Amira stepped onto the launch tile. Her restraints gave their usual faint buzz. The floor read her mass and vitals. Then, it hesitated. The algorithm couldn't identify her kinetic baseline. It defaulted to average human female. The siren sounded. Red lights flashed. She didn't sprint. She walked. Calmly. The first pulse blade dropped down, spinning vertically across the lane. She ducked, not dramatically, not with panic, but with fluid timing that suggested she knew the exact speed of the blade before it even moved. A drone fired a stun bolt. She bent sideways mid-step, letting the bolt pass just behind her ear. Another floor panel triggered a bounce pad, intending to fling her into a rotating hammer. She used the bounce to flip over it instead, landing lightly on the balls of her feet. The observers began murmuring. One instructor said she must have run the course in private simulations. Another disagreed. Her movement wasn't rehearsed, it was reactive. Too reactive. She wasn't predicting. She was reading. A deep skin revealed micro-muscle adjustments 3 times faster than standard reflex time. Yet her file still claimed no neural enhancements. By the time she reached the exit tunnel, her efficiency rating had maxed out the scale. The software glitched and started flashing a maintenance alert. Amira tilted her head, looked up at the screen as if disappointed, and then walked off to get more water. It didn't stop there. After the gauntlet, cadets were herded into the open sparring floor for strategic drills. This wasn't about brute force. Each cadet would be randomly paired and required to outmaneuver their partner using minimal contact. The first few rounds went as expected. The larger species used intimidation. The faster ones relied on misdirection. A few clever species used pheromone-based deception or kinetic field scrambling. Then Amira was called to the floor. Her name was matched with an elite Virilian cadet named Vess, the one who'd mocked her earlier. He was ranked second in the cohort, known for his ability to mimic and disrupt an opponent's movement through tactile feedback. When their names lit up, the room tensed. The match was over before it started. Vess circled her, flicking his long fingers and crouching low in a predatory stance. Amira didn't move. He lunged suddenly. She sidestepped with a pivot that made him miss by a foot. He came back again, faster, feinting left, then spinning with a leg sweep. She jumped, landed behind him, and tapped his shoulder. He froze. The buzzer rang. 1 point. Amira backed away without blinking. Vess hissed, embarrassed, and charged again, now without precision. She ducked the first strike, caught his wrist, twisted it in a motion too small to be seen clearly, and forced him to one knee. Tap. 2 points. On the third round, Vess lost his temper. He went full speed, shifting to his second mode, a bioluminescent speed burst. The observers leaned forward. He moved in a blur, closing the gap between them in milliseconds. Amira raised her arms, not to defend, but to allow. She let him grab her shirt, then rotated, dropped under his arm, and stepped behind him. Her knee tapped the back of his and his face met the mat before anyone could blink. Tap. 3 points. Match over. The gym fell silent. Vess lay on the mat for a second longer than necessary, processing what had happened. When he got up, his pride was visibly bruised. He stared at her, breathing hard, fists clenched. "What are you?" he asked in a low voice, barely above a whisper. Amira smiled and replied, "Just here for a workout." Word of the match spread through the gym like wildfire. Cadets began watching her from the corners of their eyes. Some avoided her. Others grew more curious. A few instructors began rechecking their notes. Her movements weren't fast enough to raise alarms, but they were impossible to mimic. It wasn't training. It was instinct built on experience far beyond what a school gym should handle. In the locker hall, while other cadets rehydrated or compared bruises, Vess confronted her again. This time, without an audience. "You've fought before," he said flatly. "Where?" She didn't respond at first. He stepped closer. "Earth hasn't been in a war zone since," she interrupted him softly. "We were at your border 3 years ago." Unit Echo 17. His expression changed. That unit name wasn't public. It was a black file squad deployed during the last skirmish in the outer systems. Almost no one made it back. The ones who did weren't listed in any official database. Vess stepped back, face pale, voice hushed. You were Echo. Amira looked away. Not anymore. Now I'm just trying out like everyone else. But they both knew that wasn't true. And now so did others. Because outside the locker hall, one of the surveillance drones hovered silently. Watching. Recording. Streaming the footage directly to a classified feed only the highest-ranking assessors could access. One of them leaned back, hands folded, eyes narrowed. She's not here to compete, he muttered. She's here to test us. The next day began without ceremony, but tension had crept into the gym like a fog. Cadets stretched less and stared more. The usual morning bravado was replaced with uneasy glances toward the girl in gray who sat cross-legged near the mat, fiddling with the clasp on her boot. No one spoke to her. Not even the Karka, who had spent most of yesterday barking jokes and flexing his shoulder ridges. He glanced at her once, but quickly looked away when she met his eyes with a calm that somehow felt more threatening than any growl. By mid-morning, the final trial roster was displayed on the main wall. Sparring matchups. 1-on-1. No weapons, no enhancements, and no second chances. The objective was not just victory but measured control. GalaTIC recruitment officers placed heavy weight on poise under pressure. Losers could still earn a slot if they fought well. Winners who overreached often got disqualified. Balance was everything. Amira's name blinked at the bottom of the list. Her opponent was listed as Gorvash, a Sorax bruiser built like a siege tower with 4 arms, a tail lined with pressure-sensitive ridges, and a known history of overkill. He stood 7 feet tall and had ended his last opponent's session with a dislocated jaw and a fractured rib. He didn't apologize. He said it was the cost of ambition. As soon as his name appeared next to hers, the room shifted again. Murmurs returned. The smirks did not. Everyone expected her to be flattened, but now no one was entirely sure how it would end. She stood when called, walking to the ring with no visible emotion. Gorvash followed, stomping with theatrical exaggeration, arms flexed, growling softly for effect. One of the assessors whispered that pairing him against a human girl seemed unfair. Another replied that the system chose matchups at random. A third leaned forward and quietly said there was no such thing as random in a room filled with classified files. In the ring, the referee stepped back as the safety dome flickered into place. Amira rolled her shoulders once and finally did something no one expected. She spoke. Her voice was quiet, but clear. Do I have permission to remove my restraints? The referee blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. He turned toward the panel, where the lead instructor narrowed her eyes. State purpose. Amira replied without turning. To ensure an accurate evaluation. A brief pause stretched into a silence thick enough to feel. The lead assessor conferred quickly with a man in a deep blue uniform who had entered the observation booth just 5 minutes ago. He wore no insignia. Only a silver pin in the shape of a 5-pointed star. The kind used on internal security documents. He gave a single nod. Granted. The room didn't react at first. But when Amira reached down and tapped the digital lock on her wrist restraints, and they hissed open with a high-pitched chirp, several cadets instinctively stepped back from the ring. The black cuffs fell with a faint clang. Then she reached for the bands on her ankles. Those deactivated too. A subtle shimmer pulsed from her legs up to her spine as her body adjusted. Even the lights in the room flickered for a second, as if something inside her had just synced with the building itself. Amira took a deep breath and exhaled once. When she opened her eyes, they looked the same, but somehow older. Gorvash laughed. You think you scare me without your toys? That's cute. He rushed her before the referee could finish announcing the start. His first strike was a low sweeping punch designed to throw her backward, followed by a tail whip aimed for her midsection. Both missed. Not because she blocked them, but because she wasn't there. She'd moved so fast the dome's sensors glitched for half a second before recovering. Gorvash roared and came in with all four fists. She stepped into him, turned, and used the angle of his own weight to lift and flip him. Not fully. Just enough to throw off his balance. He hit the floor hard, but not dangerously. She stepped back again. No follow-up. No grand pose. Just precision. The assessors immediately began typing. One reached for the override button, worried it might escalate. The man in the blue coat raised a hand. Wait. Gorvash scrambled up, confused more than hurt. His pride now far more damaged than his body. He lunged again, tail first this time, swinging with brute momentum. She bent backward like her spine had no limits, letting the tail pass over her nose, then brought her foot up in a reverse arc and tapped the side of his neck. A blow, yes. But light. Calculated. Legal. The dome rang with the contact tone. First point, Amira. Now the room wasn't just watching, they were frozen. Even the carcass stopped mid-bite on a ration bar, crumbs falling to the floor. A few cadets exchanged stunned glances. This wasn't strength. This was a performance. But not for them. She wasn't showing off. She was showing restraint. That was scarier. Gorvash bellowed and charged again. This time wild. She allowed him to get close. Just enough. Then she ducked under his leading arm and used her elbow to shift his balance mid-step. It sent him off course just enough to make him stumble. She did not strike. Instead, she let him fall forward and caught him by the shoulder, keeping him from hitting the ground. Then she released him and stepped back. Second point. The referee looked at the panel, waiting for a reaction. None came. The match continued. Gorvash got up slower, breathing harder. His expression now a mix of rage and disbelief. He looked at her like he had never seen a human before. Maybe he hadn't. Not one like her. The third charge was faster. No taunts, no theatrics. Just a direct sprint. This time, Amira moved forward too. They met in the middle. What happened in the next second was never fully captured by the cameras. Only the final frame showed Gorvash flat on the mat, arms pinned gently behind him, head turned to the side, and Amira crouched beside him like she was checking for a pulse. Which she wasn't. She was waiting for the buzzer. When it sounded, she stood up and walked away. Third point. Match over. The dome faded. The silence held. And then a single voice from the stands whispered what many were already thinking. She wasn't fighting him. She was sparing him. Inside the observation booth, one of the junior assessors looked at her new score display. The rating system had frozen again. It simply read, "Input exceeds parameters." The man in the blue coat turned to the lead instructor and said quietly, "Unseal her record." "Now?" "No. Broadcast it." She hesitated. Then tapped the command. Throughout the station, on every screen that showed live tryout coverage, the same alert message appeared. Accessing restricted profile. Subject designation, Avalanche. Combat tier, Omega level operative. Clearance grade, Human Defense Command. Suppression level, 72%. In the training floor, cadets stared at the display. Some didn't understand. Others did. Vess, watching from the side, took one step backward without realizing it. Amira looked up, saw the message, and frowned slightly. "Well," she muttered, "guess that secret's out." The gym didn't return to normal after that. It couldn't. Every cadet who had once mocked or ignored Amira now moved around her with the quiet nervousness of people who had misjudged a loaded weapon. She didn't seem to notice or care. She kept to herself, sitting on the bench near the window where starlight flickered across the polished tiles. Occasionally she sipped from her bottle or tapped the side of her boot, like she was waiting for something. No one approached her, not even to ask about the announcement. They didn't need to. The message was still plastered across the viewing panels. Her real name meant nothing to them anymore. All they saw was her designation. Avalanche. A word now spoken in whispers. The instructors didn't call her into any more sessions. Technically, she had already passed every test. More than passed. Her results had broken 3 systems. A full data reset was underway in the Sparring analytics room. And still, she waited. The head of assessment tried to play it cool, pretending the tryouts were continuing as scheduled. But beneath the professionalism, the unease spread like a slow-burning fuse. Everyone knew something bigger was coming. They just didn't know what. Then it happened. A metallic groan echoed through the station floor as the gravity shifted without warning. Not by much, just enough to throw everyone slightly off balance. Training lights flickered. The intercom buzzed twice, then fell silent. The screen nearest the gym door blinked red. A facility-wide security override had been triggered. But not by anyone inside the station. External breach. Unidentified vessel docking on a restricted platform. Unauthorized. Shield bypassed. Chaos erupted in seconds. Cadets scattered, some rushing toward the emergency stations, others grabbing equipment they had no business touching. Instructors yelled conflicting orders. One tried to lock down the gym, but the system refused to respond. The doors hissed open instead. A gust of colder air swept in from the corridor. And then the sound of heavy boots echoed in from the hallway. 2 figures appeared in the entry, armored in black synthplate that shimmered faint blue along the edges. No insignias. No identification. But their movement was unmistakable. They weren't soldiers. They were collectors. GalaTIC Clean Division. Internal retrieval units. Their presence anywhere outside classified facilities was considered an emergency. They didn't speak. The lead one stepped forward, arm outstretched toward Amira. She didn't move. He stopped halfway into the gym and said flatly, "Directive override. Human asset retrieval. Stand down." Every eye turned to her. She stood slowly. Not alarmed. Not tense. Just tired. Like this was an old song she'd heard before. She tilted her head and replied with a voice that sounded colder than before. "Under whose authority?" The lead armored figure didn't answer. Instead, his helmet flickered, revealing a flickering blue faceplate. Behind it, static buzzed. The command was rerouted through a 3rd channel. A new voice emerged. Male. Rough. Unfamiliar to the cadets. Very familiar to her. "Return to base, Lieutenant. Your evaluation phase is over." She stared at the helmet a second longer, then took a single step forward. "No." It was one word. But the weight of it seemed to push the air out of the room. The second collector raised his arm. His gauntlet unfolded, revealing a dampener spike meant to disrupt enhanced nervous systems. The kind designed to subdue operatives like her. She was faster. Her hand moved in a blur. One flick. The spike device snapped in half and clattered to the floor. Before the sound of it hitting the tile could even finish, she was behind the collector, hand pressed to the base of his helmet. He froze. "I told you," she whispered. "This is my assignment. Not yours." She stepped back. Let him go. He didn't turn around. He didn't even speak. The gym watched all of it, stunned into silence. Then the security dome activated on its own. The gym lights dropped. Emergency lights came online in vertical bars of red. The station recognized her as an internal threat. The system had overridden its own calibration to match the presence of an Omega-tier subject acting without compliance. A siren wailed. She didn't flinch. But she looked around once, scanning every face. Every cadet. Every officer. Every camera. Then she said, "Initiate override, priority clearance Echo 17, confirm command code, Avalanche." The dome shattered. Not literally. But it folded itself back with a mechanical sigh, as if surrendering. The lights reset. The sirens cut. The collectors stepped back. One of them muttered something into his headset and left the gym without another word. The other followed. And then, from the far end of the corridor, someone else arrived. This man didn't wear armor. He wore a coat. Long, dark, lined with interface seams and tags of service. His shoes clicked with officer precision. His face was unshaven but alert. And his voice was dry when he said, "I gave you 2 days before they tried to pull you out. Looks like they're getting impatient." Amira smiled without humor. "They always do." The man turned to the assessors, who had gathered silently on the upper platform. Then to the cadets below. "Your rankings are now obsolete. This wasn't a tryout. It was an audit." Confusion rippled through the crowd. He let the weight of it settle. "This station was selected as a stress test for interspecies alliance under uncertain variables. She was your variable." The silence grew heavier. "You failed." Gasps. One protest. A Varillian girl stepped forward and shouted, "She's not a student. She's a spy." The man looked at her. "No. She's a soldier. And your best chance at survival if a real war starts." He turned to leave, then paused. "To those who adapted, observed, and learned from her, congratulations. You may still be invited to join a joint force task unit. To those who mocked, attacked, or dismissed her, no further commentary was given." Amira walked past them without a glance, boots echoing on tile, each step a reminder. She hadn't just beaten them. She'd been holding back the entire time. And when the time came to fight something bigger than ego, she'd still be the one standing between them and the void. As the gym door closed behind her, one of the Karka whispered, "So what now?" No one answered. Because the answer was already gone. The transport shuttle was silent, save for the low hum of its magnetic core and the occasional beep from the autopilot. Amira sat near the viewport, watching stars drift by in cold, indifferent patterns. The chaos of the gym was already far behind her, but its echoes still pulsed quietly in her thoughts. She had done what she came to do. Assessment complete. Protocol observed. She'd even kept her restraints on longer than recommended. That alone should have earned her a commendation. But there was no sense of victory in her posture. Only stillness. Across from her sat Commander Thorne, the man in the coat. He didn't speak for a while, simply scanned a datapad filled with feedback reports, performance anomalies, and mission flags. He scrolled past most of it. Numbers couldn't tell him what her face already had. When he finally spoke, his voice carried none of the coldness expected of military brass. "They're still arguing over whether to classify your presence as a breach." She didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on the stars. "Let them. They'll do what they always do. Edit the records, seal the data, issue a public statement about protocol. Say it was an isolated error in candidate pairing." He nodded slowly, then folded the pad and set it aside. "You left quite an impression." She tilted her head slightly. Not quite a smirk. Not quite a sigh. "They weren't ready. They never are." Silence again. Then she asked, "Did any of them pass?" Thorne tapped the side of the bench, thinking. 2 showed promise. A Varillian cadet who backed off when he realized he didn't understand your movement, and a Karka who stopped treating everything like a boulder to smash. She finally turned to him. "That's all?" "There was one more," he added, "but they requested reassignment before the evaluation ended. Said they wanted to join logistics. I consider that self-awareness." She leaned back, letting the seat absorb her weight. "I didn't mean to humiliate them. I know. They just kept pushing. I know." Thorne stood, pacing once toward the front of the shuttle, then paused beside the command console. "You know what this means, right?" She didn't answer. "Your name's out there now. Not just your code name. Your story. Cadets talk. Instructors leak. That match will be circulating within the hour." She looked away again, but her jaw tensed. "Let them talk." He nodded. "It's already begun, you know. They're posting footage of the dome collapse. Editing it with dramatic music. Some civilian station already dubbed you the Ghost of Veltrin." She made a small sound, almost a laugh. "I preferred Avalanche. It's more accurate." The shuttle glided through a thin debris field, left over from an old mining station. Broken panels and defunct satellites drifted by like forgotten bones. Either of them commented on it. There was something fitting about the view. After a while, Thorn pulled up a fresh screen and rotated it toward her. New orders. She raised an eyebrow. Already? You thought they'd let you take a break? I thought they might at least pretend to ask. He didn't smile, but there was a faint twitch at the corner of his mouth. The next academy is already prepping. Higher tier. Fewer cadets. Most of them come from noble lines or field-tested bloodlines. They won't laugh when they see you. They'll study you. Try to copy you. She frowned. They'll fail. Maybe. He tapped the screen again, bringing up the target roster. Your objective will remain the same. Observe. Engage only when necessary. Don't draw attention unless protocol breaks. She nodded slowly. Any sign of active interference? Possibly. We think one of the species on the Council is using their cadets to test anti-human tactics. Discreetly. This assignment is as much about catching that as it is about you assessing talent. She leaned forward, squinting at the roster. Anyone I've crossed paths with before? He hesitated. One name came up. She waited. Rowena. The name hit her like a sharp change in air pressure. Not visible on her face. But inside, her chest tightened. He survived? He's not the same. Bionic enhancements. Full memory wipe claimed. But we're not convinced. She nodded slowly, 1,000 thoughts crawling through her mind. Rowena wasn't a rival. He was worse. A reflection of what she might have become under different orders. Under different handlers. I'll handle it. Thorn's voice lowered. You sure? I have to be. They sat in silence for a while after that. The stars didn't pause. Neither did time. The shuttle's AI announced their approach vector and adjusted speed. The docking clamps prepared to engage. Another station came into view. Larger than the last. Darker. No welcoming banners. No decorative lights. Just steel and gravity. This was not a tryout facility. This was a proving ground. As they prepared to disembark, Thorn handed her a small device. It looked like a necklace, but its casing was military grade. She held it in her hand for a moment, then fastened it around her neck. New suppressors? Adaptive ones? They'll change based on local gravity and environmental stimuli. You'll need them for the first phase. Keep your profile low. She secured it, adjusting it so it lay flat under her collar. And if someone recognizes me? Then you do what Avalanche does. She nodded once and stepped off the shuttle. Inside the docking bay, armed sentries scanned her with thermal and neural filters. None of them triggered. Her restraints were doing their job. She was nothing more than a visitor. For now. But deep inside the facility, someone else was already watching her approach. Rowena sat in a dim command room, hands folded, eyes blank. A feed displayed her walking calmly across the bay. He tilted his head. Avalanche, he said softly, like recalling a dream. One of the guards asked if he said something. He shook his head. Just memory echoes. Outside, Amira walked into her next test. Not as a cadet. Not as a soldier. But as a ghost in the system. A quiet storm. A lesson waiting to be delivered to those who still thought Earth's warriors were behind the times. They weren't. They had just been walking slower. So no one else could hear them coming.